Back in 1979, when I first plugged into a Marshall, I had no idea I was touching the sonic DNA of a man who'd started out as a drummer, a teacher, and a shopkeeper in post-war London. That man was James Charles Marshall, born on July 29th, 1923, a child shaped by hardship, hospital stays, and a body weakened by tubercular bones, yet a mind sharpened by discipline and an ear tuned to rhythm. Jim began his life in music not as an amplifier wizard, but as a drummer and drum instructor teaching at the Institute of Education in London, later opening a modest drum shop in Hanwell, West London. By 1960, that shop, modest in size, bit enormous in influence, had become a hub for working musicians, a place where drummers, guitarists, and bass players gathered, argued tone, and dreamed of louder, more expressive sound. What made Jim different was that he listened, not just to the notes, but to the unspoken hunger in the room. Guitarists like Pete Townshend of The Who, Ritchie Blackmore, and Big Jim Sullivan kept returning with the same complaint. American amps were expensive, hard to get, and not quite loud or aggressive enough for the new kind of rock they were forging. They wanted something that could cut through a live stage, something that could distort in a musical way, something that felt less like polite hi-fi and more like a sonic weapon. Jim saw the gap, and crucially, he saw the opportunity. He had no formal training in electronics, but he had a shop, a small workshop, and two key collaborators, Ken Brann, the shop's repair engineer, and Dudley Craven, a young EMI apprentice with a knack for circuits. Together, they set out to build something that didn't yet exist, a British-built guitar amplifier that could rival and then surpass the American giants. Their starting point was the Fender Bassman, a 4x10 combo widely admired for its warmth and headroom. Ken Brann dissected a Bassman, mapped its innards, and began crafting a British reinterpretation, not a copy, but a reimagining. Jim, meanwhile, focused on the physical design, the cabinets, the layout, the way the amp would sit on stage, the way it would feel to the player. By the fall of 1962, the first prototypes emerged from that little shop, hand-wired, slightly rough around the edges, but with a voice that turned heads. In 1963, Marshall Amplification officially released its first production model, the JTM-45, a 50-watt head inspired by the Fender Bassman, but voiced with a darker, more saturated character. The JTM stood for Jim, Terry, and Mary. Jim himself, his son Terry, and his wife Mary, a quiet family signature stamped onto what would become one of the most iconic names in rock. The JTM-45 wasn't just an amp, it was a statement. It was cheaper than the imported American alternatives, built to handle the punishing schedules of touring bands, and crucially, it distorted in a way that felt musical, not broken. Guitarists discovered that when you pushed it, the tubes would bloom into a singing, sustaining overdrive, a sound that would soon become the backbone of hard rock, heavy metal, and punk. From that first JTM-45, the story accelerates. Demand exploded. By 1964, Marshall had opened a dedicated factory in Hayes, and by 1965, the company was signing worldwide distribution deals. But the real turning point came when Pete Townshend came back and said, in effect, 50 watts isn't enough, I need something that can match the power of the stage. That challenge birthed the 100-watt Marshall head, a monstrous beast that pushed the limits of what tube amplification could do. Paired with massive 4x12 speaker cabinets, stacked one on top of another, it created the now legendary Marshall stack. A towering wall of sound that became the visual and sonic symbol of rock's raw power. So when we talk about the origin of Marshall amplifiers, we're really talking about the convergence of three forces: a man shaped by rhythm and resilience, a generation of guitarists demanding more power and tone, and a small workshop in Hanwell that dared to translate that hunger into hardware. Jim Marshall never set out to invent rock tone, he set out to solve a practical problem for working musicians. But in doing so, he unknowingly rewired the language of electric guitar, giving birth to a lineage of amplifiers that would echo through every stadium, every rehearsal room, and every bedroom practice space for the next 6 decades. From the perspective of sonic sciences, the Marshall amplifier is much more than a box of tubes and transformers. It is a resonant artifact of human intention, a device that captured the physical limits of air, wood, and metal, and then turned them into a language of emotion. It stands at the crossroads of both physics and feeling, where voltage becomes voice, and where the push of a tube into saturation becomes the audible signature of rebellion, ecstasy, and catharsis. What began in a modest drum shop in Hanwell was, in essence, the birth of a new sonic paradigm, one in which amplification ceased to be mere reproduction and became creative force. And so this story of Jim Marshall, of that first JTM 45, of the stacks that rose like cathedrals on stage, is not an endpoint, but a launching pad. In the chapters ahead, we'll trace the evolution of Marshall's lineage, from vintage plexus to modern JVMs, from bedroom-sized combos to arena-shaking stacks, defining the iconic sound and images of Jimi Hendrix and the countless players who've shaped genres with their own unique relationship to this sound. This is only the tip of the guitar cable, the first note in a much longer, richer exploration of the machines, the minds, and the music that Marshall helped set in motion. This is Sonic Sciences. Stay in tune, and I'll see you soon. As always, thanks for your time and attention.